take us there. Okay, I think we are live. Let me just double check. Okay, we are live.
We are.
Welcome everyone to the Graceline tonight. This is of course Kyle and Lynn, and we have our special guest. We have a special guest with us tonight. Isabel Hunt. Is Hunt right? With the D is silent?
Yes.
Okay, Isabel Hunt. I'll tell you a little bit about what I know about Isabel from the time we've been Facebook friends. I had saw a comment that she had made maybe about a year or so ago on someone else's post, and this comment, it attracted me so strongly because she was talking about women and the inequality of women, especially in the church realm, and how so many people have been mistreated, especially women and people of color. And I love people who express inclusiveness and talk about it that way. And I saw that comment and I was like, you are it. I mean, you're it. And I sent her a friend request and she accepted it. And I was so super happy that she did. And everything that I've seen of hers so far has been really just so love-based, so inclusive, so, impactful with her heart for humanity. And I really, really appreciate that. And then Lynn found her. Somehow or another, Lynn and her connected. And then Lynn was blown away. And I'll let you tell them about that, Lynn.
Well, when we connected, and I probably connected to her through you because, Kyle is Facebook phenom, and so we probably got connected that way. But one of the things that really attracted me, and we'll talk about this a little later, I know Isabel has a documentary that she's working on that will be coming out hopefully real soon. And it's called The Power of Connection, right?
Yes, correct.
And anything that is out here or will be out here that brings people together, connects people, instead of disconnecting people, is something that I'm very interested. So I've been, checking out your posts and some of the things that you have been writing, and some of the things that you're putting out there about your documentary that's coming up. And I'm very intrigued. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to actually see it, when it's finally developed. What you say, me too. But I just, the post that I've seen from you, I really love your heart, as Kyle was saying. And we just really wanted to bring you up because we believe that some of the people that may tune in tonight, we have a beautiful group of people that tune in with us and hang out with us on Mondays. I really just wanted them to meet you and to hear your heart. So, I guess the first thing we can start with is just, whatever's on your heart, tell us about yourself. How did you get to this place? One of the things that we love to hear is people's journey, how they've gotten to the place that they're at right now. So anything on your heart that you want to just share with me?
I try to keep it short because that's a long story, but keeping it short, I'm originally from Germany. I grew up in East Germany, meaning behind the walls under communism, Soviet communism, for a few years. I'm not quite that old, but for a few years. So it was just an interesting and very organized experience growing up within that dynamic. And then the wall came down in '89, and I just watched my parents, how they were able to work through some of the things because they belonged to church, and under communism regime, when you belong to a church, you weren't allowed to get higher education, which is something that I actually want to talk about later as well, because the spiritual always has something to do with oppression. There is a connection right there. And so my dad studied sociology or social work after the wall came down, and I was always so fascinated by people's behavior. So I kind of started studying with him at the age of 10, 11. I started reading his psychology books, and so I always was just really fascinated. At the age of 12, I had a weird prophetic dream where I saw myself speaking on stage in front of thousands of people, but not in German. And at that point, I really hated every other language. I'm not a language person. It's really hard for me to learn a new language. And I didn't know what it was until we had some outreach group from a Bible school come to our church, and they spoke American English. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I was speaking in that dream. But I don't want to go to the US. I don't want to have to go there. I just didn't want to. For one, I was really mad at them too, because they didn't save us. They only saved the West Germany. And so it was like, no, you left us. I don't want to go over there. But it just kind of haunted me. And to the point that I knew I had no other choice. I had to go. I just had to. And I kept hearing a voice that said, if you ever want to make a difference, you will have to go to the US, because that's where it starts. And I never knew what to do with that. And so when I was 18, I came to the US for the first time as an au pair. I lived in DC. And when I came here, within a week, I felt like I was here before. I was here. And I jokingly said to my parents, are you sure you didn't adopt me? Because I think that was my home. And they were like, no, really. They didn't adopt me. I love my family, and I really didn't want to leave them. I haven't seen them in way too long. But after that year, I came back and I never really fully felt at home back in Germany. It was just really weird. I felt like an outsider. I didn't really fit in. And I, on purpose, spoke mostly English with people. It was quite interesting. I studied then economics because I thought this is how I can come back to the US if I figure something out that gives me the opportunity to apply for jobs. That went totally downhill after 2 years. I was so depressed and had such a high level of panic attacks and anxiety that I got kicked out of university. I got a really nice letter that says, you will not be able to come back next year. We're sorry.
Wow.
And I thought, oh no, now my dream is totally done. I can't do that. But I knew in my heart that economy or economics in general, it never was anything on my radar. I was always bad at it. And so I started over, studied sociology, psychology at a different university, and worked with exchange students at my university, which was great. I loved it, loved the young people. Okay, at that point, they weren't that much younger than me, but they were younger. So after that, laws changed so that I was able to come back again for an exchange year. I then went from New York to San Francisco and ended up in Indianapolis. That was a very interesting journey and a very desperate journey as well, because I always knew I had to be here. I had no money. I didn't know what I was supposed to do and what I was supposed to discover about myself. I just couldn't figure it out. And at some point, even though my parents really surprisingly trusted me with everything, even when I got almost deported and had to go to Canada, at some point they were like, okay, maybe it's time to come back and just start your life. Because at that point I was 28 and I didn't have a family. I didn't have ever had a real job with real money. And when all my friends already had family and kids, and I didn't have any of that. And I said, no, I have to be here. Something tells me that I have to be here. And then I got married. We have been married for almost 10 years now. And we have a 6-year-old son who is incredible, very wise, very old soul. And after I got married, I got into really bad identity crisis. I didn't feel German. I didn't feel American. And I started a coaching training because I didn't know where to find a job really. And that was something that I could do on my own. And my husband totally supported me with all of that. And through this coaching training, it was an ontological training, so it was more spiritually based. I was stripped naked. I hated them and loved them at the same time. I loved my coach because he really helped me through this identity crisis. And I realized that I am not a citizen. I don't belong to any country just because it's where I was born. Because I believe in reincarnation. I believe that we had past lives and they were all over the world. And I had so many different experiences that I have now found out, from being a slave to dying very often, very young, to being an orphan. It was a very interesting experience to even figure that out. And so I felt I am a world citizen. I just seem to be able to relate to people in a different way. And then through this training, I realized, oh, wait, not everyone sees color like I do. Like, that's not normal. So I found out that what I have is synesthesia, where your mirror neurons translates everything into color, which is really cool. And over time, through my own development over the last 10 years, I noticed that this is actually a spiritual gift, and that the color changes according to emotional state of places, of people, of numbers and letters, depending on how you use it in what context. And that helped me to connect with people on that very deep level without all the biases and the prejudice. I still have them and I still had them, but I was more aware of when they showed up, when they didn't align with the color that I seen. And so that's pretty much how I got where I'm at today. I've done this work. I did a lot of emotions clearing work with people. I'm able to tune in with people in a very easy way. For me, it's like people sitting next to me, even though I'm connecting with them online. And that's been really, really powerful to just connect with people on a level there that makes you realize, hey, we are one. We are all connected. And that the God that we talk about through Christianity, I grew up Lutheran, pretty strict Lutheran. My grandma still thinks I'm part of a sect. That really gives you it's a conditioning that you grew up with, and suddenly you have to shift and you think like your whole world is falling apart. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. If all my friends are going to leave me because my belief changes and how I relate to people, is my husband going to leave me? He's totally on board. He's fine. He is very, very intuitive. He is a master herbalist and naturopath, so he understands the natural world. He is the one who's very grounded and always reflects back to me what's going on or what he sees within the system. And I'm the outspoken one. People always say, you're the troublemaker. I'm like, that's him. I'm just saying it because I have no shame. Like, I don't mind talking about it out loud. If people hate on me, I just leave and go back to Germany. So I don't care that much about it. So it's been interesting. And then last year in August, I got frustrated with my business. Nothing really felt aligned anymore. I just didn't want to do the old typical entrepreneurship thing. It just felt icky. And I was wondering what I could do because I have so much material and speeches that came to me in my dreams. And every morning I woke up and had another speech. And my speeches are very, with analogy, very visual. Like, I love speaking in pictures. And so one night I went to bed, I watched a documentary, and I said, I need to do something with the knowledge that I have that is more approachable to people, not the business type like thing. And my husband looks at me and he's like, well, why don't you do a documentary? And I looked, I'm like, nah, I've never done that filmmaking. Like, I've never even done anything like it. And he said, well, think about it. Well, wouldn't you know it? I went to sleep. Like, everything always comes to me through dreams. I woke up in the morning, I had the entire script written out. Wow. Right in front of me. It was right there. And I just felt that need to post it online. And I said, hey, I have this idea. It's crazy. I've never done it and I have no budget for it. But anyone willing to help me with it, from scriptwriter, editor, videographer. And I turned around and within 2 weeks I had my team together and I'm like, wow, what's happening? What is happening? And back then I didn't know what would be happening now. And now we're looking back, the entire team, and like, wow, this documentary has become so significant in creating more awareness. People are more open to hearing what you have to say, and they may actually be able to receive it and not just judge it. And so that's where I'm at today, still working and tracking along and trying to figure out how we can get some more funding so that we can get it done faster.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I
don't know if that was the short version, but it was the shorter version.
I'm saying wow because there is a truckload of stuff to unpack there. I mean, your spiritualism or your mysticism or whatever we want to call it. I mean, you're going to sleep. having something on your mind or your heart, going to sleep, having it all kind of come to light for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear law of attraction. I hear, your your ability to create through imagination. I hear, um, um, your awareness of our oneness, you
Mhm.
know, and I, this is a new field for us, Lynn and I. This is pretty new for us. This is something over the past couple of years we just started to learn. We're just starting to embrace. We're just starting to see the power of our thoughts, intentions, our
Yeah.
feelings, that frequency, that vibration, how all that ties in. Like we grew up in a church environment, kind of like you were saying. We grew up very regimented in a denomination type setting.
Yeah.
I did. Lynn kind of came on a little bit later down the road, but all I knew was the Bible and church
Yeah.
protocol and church activity and how to dance around the building and dance,
Yeah.
shout as we called it.
Oh, you Americans are crazy about that. I don't get it. The first time I came to the US, like seriously, the first time I came to the Germans are very settled. Like we go and we sit and we do what we're supposed to do. That's kind of how we work, right? There is no dancing in church.
Oh, we
And
dance. We shout. We don't even dance. We call it shouting.
my first experience, I'll need to share that with you. There was a church up the road, and my friend and I, we wanted to find a church that we could go to while we were here living with another family. And we got to the church, I think it was a Baptist church, and we got in and immediately we got scared. We got so scared. They came in, welcomed us, were really nice. Like, you guys can sit right here. And then they locked the doors. They had huge guys in front of the doors, like bodyguard type. And then the pastor in the front, we just looked at each other and like, can we just go? Can we go? The pastor was like, I call it Rumpelstiltskin. I don't know if you've heard of that guy. It's a myth story.
Yeah.
Who's running around the fire and always says, good that nobody knows that I'm Rumpelstiltskin. And he's helping this lady in the tower, right, making gold. And it's a good story, but that's kind of how he was running around the altar. And I was like, what is he doing? Like they were all shouting and yelling and holding each other's hands, and they were going crazy. They would not let us leave. They would not let us leave no matter how much we tried. And then at the end, they had the youth come after us. Like they literally waited, like you need to stay here until the other comes, and the youth people. And they were trying to convince us to come back. We never went back. Ever. So you guys have so many different kind of churches here that you don't necessarily see in Europe. You don't see that in Europe. It's very sterile in Europe. Church is very separate from everyday's life in Europe. So that was a totally new experience. But I think because of that experience, it opened me up to different perspectives as well about church.
Mm-hmm.
What have I learned in my church that is actually in the way for me to connecting with other people who are different, who think differently, who worship differently, who pray differently,
Yeah.
And that just opened the entire journey for this spiritual experience.
Well, when they lock the doors, let me tell you what that means.
That was so scary, I'm telling you.
They need to raise a certain amount of money. And no one can leave until that money's raised. So that's what they mean when they lock the door.
That's
they need to raise
true.
a certain amount of money today, and no one can leave until that money's raised.
Yeah, we got a few gifts out of it. I think a coffee mug that we never used and just left with the family that we worked for. That was my first experience with church in America. It was very interesting. My very first.
Wow. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, look, tell us, if you will, just tell us a little bit. I'm very curious to hear more beyond what I've been reading. If you could tell us more about your documentary, what is it about? What does it address? Anything that is on your heart to share with us?
Okay, would love to. So what came up for me through my work, I've done, I'm very focused in my work on emotional health from a spiritual and philosophical perspective. For me, it was important to understand the history. How do we define emotions? How did it come to it historically that we just say, okay, if you have these and these symptoms and your body does this, then this is the emotion that you have. And I always was very skeptical about it. I'm a sociologist, so we love labels, right? We love to put everything in a category so that it makes sense and that it's easier to understand. But I noticed that from a sociological perspective, that this actually created more division between people who are different. It's just like we label minorities as minority group or third world country as third world country. Who determined that this is a third world country and we're first world? Like, who created the hierarchical setting of this, you know?
Yeah.
And I always wondered about that. I always didn't quite feel right about it. And so I did a lot of research and I said, okay, I think what we're missing is the spiritual side of how we interact with ourselves, but also with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, over the last couple of years, there were a lot of people who jumped on the emotional intelligence train. Everyone noticed, oh, we need to talk about mindset, about mindfulness, emotional health. And something just felt icky in most cases. You could tell that people were just kind of book smart and just talked about it to talk about it. And something was missing for me. Because if you talk to someone about emotions, it's great to hear, but most people don't know what to do with it because our brain learns through pictures. We memorize everything in pictures. Mm-hmm. And because I'm a visionary, I love putting everything in pictures. I see everything. Like most of the time I talk to people, even sometimes in interviews or when I work with clients, I close my eyes because I have all those different pictures in my head that I'm trying to explain to them in words. And so I said, something needs to happen. Something needs to shift that people can more tangibly understand what's going on inside of you. How is that all connected? What is happening within your subconscious? Mm-hmm. And so we came up with this house idea where we said, okay, so we have the real world, the 3D illusional world that we have created through systems and programming and, you know, how we have been raised. And then we have this house. And it was also interesting how we got that house because we couldn't find one that would fit and it was cold. So we needed one with electricity. Otherwise we would have, well, it was 20 degrees when we started filming this. And suddenly I just posted it. I said, please be in alignment with me, in agreement that we will find a house that is perfect within the next 2 days. Within 2 hours, I had a bunch of tags of one on the same person. She reached out to me right away. She said, I saw it. I felt the urgency behind it. I had to call you. What do you need? And so she told me about her house. It was a healing center a couple years ago, and she moved to California. She's back right now. And she said, if you want, you can have the keys and you can use the house if that works for you. And at first it was like a round house. Like, I don't think I can use that unless I change the script. But then we got there and there was this really amazing Spanish style house. The doors are that thick, dungeon style doors. It looks incredible. The rooms all stone. And it was just amazing. I was like, this is perfect. This is so perfect. And then it had like almost like a greenhouse between the Spanish style house and the round house. And so we said, okay, what we can do, there is the reality outside. And then this is the consciousness, this glass part through which I see everything through color. Like the glass was, for me, is all in color. And then we go into the Spanish home as our subconscious. And so we have different rooms that we mark differently, from social programming to conditioning. Like we have all kind of different rooms that we go to. And that also included a beautiful a stairwell that went down. It was like one of those round ones. And we knew that this is going to be the spiritual part of it. And so when we talk about spirituality and how we have been programmed a certain way within religion, especially within religious institutions, we have to go deep if we want to unwind that. So we we went down and
Yeah.
went deep.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of animation and how we explain and illustrations, how we explain certain things, how we interact, and different parts of the house, like the cracks in the foundation, the peeled paint that was there, that was some other stuff that was broken. We're going to use that as the trauma that we experience that makes that house unstable, to the point where if we would just push too much away, we would be afraid that it would all collapse. What happens if our subconscious and the way it's programmed collapses? There's a big fear about that. What if I cannot rebuild that? What if I'm lost within that rearranging of my subconscious programming? And so we're putting that into a little story, because the whole documentary is based on an experience that I had when I first came, and I dated a black guy, and there were a lot of judgments because I wasn't used to that, and I only knew about people with darker skin color from TV. They were always gang members and guns, the violence. And so we're talking, I'm very, very honest in this documentary, what subconsciously came up for me. And we're making that very tangible, very visual in the way we have filmed that. Almost like I'm stepping into my subconscious and I'm going through all the files, through all the trash. We even take out some trash out the door, and we made it really tangible. And I just posted a little snippet of one of the animations that we're doing, which is incredible. Kelly is an amazing animator, and that already has me excited. I mean, it's just really the very beginning of that particular animation, where we go deep, where we really understand that we are one with the universe, with everything that exists, with all that is. And then we have her go through the eyes into our subconscious even deeper. And then we see a beautiful gate, and that has a curtain. And behind that curtain is our soul. There's bright light. And also behind that, there's a connection between the soul and that gate. And that's our emotions. I call them the guardians of our soul. And often what we experience is we hear the emotions through the curtain, which is our ego, which is our perception of self, but not our true self. And then we usually act according to what we experience through ego. And then we take the curtain away and just really revolutionize how we connect and how we just created a picture of our emotional world. And I think that will be really transformational for most people, because suddenly you have a different picture and you're like, hey, they're actually my friend. I can have a conversation with them. That's kind of cool. And it kind of relates to a course that I created 2 years ago, the Empowered Warrior, where I learned that emotions are not a specific label, because everyone experiences different emotions according to their past experiences.
Yeah.
And not the same way. Someone says, oh my gosh, you look angry, when for them it might actually be sadness. It's just a way of expressing it differently. And we have forgotten to be curious. And I think the whole documentary is really an invitation to become more curious, to become like the children. I always love that, become like the children. And I look at my son and I just always tell him, son, always ask questions. Always ask questions. I don't care how annoyed I am or whatever. I want you to ask questions, why things show up, and explain to me what you experience. And I just love working on it, because I can tell that especially younger people are very resonating with it. I have lots of young people working on this documentary, which I'm really happy about. And they all like, this resonates so much. And it's questions that we ask ourselves, but we never really were able to communicate that with our parents or grandparents, because they wouldn't understand it. And this really can give us some guidance. And who knew that it would be such perfect timing for what we experience now. And that just always leaves me in awe. Like, okay, in September, August, I didn't know that this would be coming, but something already told me that this is going to be significant. And I just said yes to it. Wow. So that's the basic of the documentaries. I just want to make it more visual instead of just talking about it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, especially having something visually that we can see.
Yeah.
I know I didn't grow up with any type of education or training or insight to what was happening inside of me. I didn't know anything about the subconscious mind. I didn't know anything about the conscious mind. I didn't know anything about thoughts, feelings, emotions,
Right.
vibrations, and frequencies. I didn't know anything about that. I knew church. I knew Holy Ghost. And growing up in that type of environment, the programming is everything has to come through prayer. Everything has to come through fasting. Everything has to come through some type of activity we do to get God to respond to us.
Yes.
So we went at it, and we went at it with all we had, giving, doing, but nothing was changing. I mean, the talk about doing some psychological work, that was taboo. To talk about, going to see people, to talk about your feelings and what was going on inside of you, that was a no. And
No.
it's so amazing that you said about the young people that you're connecting with. I think they resonate with it more because this language is in our atmosphere a whole lot more. It wasn't.
Yes.
It didn't seem to be too much in my time growing up as a kid, but I'm glad that it's here now, and I'm glad that young people are really resonating with it, and people in our category and people that are older than us, they're saying, "Wait a minute, this makes sense to me," because when I started learning this, in the spirit side started making sense. It started to come to light. I started to see a pathway into how I can create and have the things that were deep down inside of me, how I can bring them out without all of the laborious work that I was programmed to do.
Yes. And I think growing up for me, it was always God is somewhere sitting in the sky and you pray to him. And sometimes he shows you favor and then other times not,
Right.
because you're supposed to learn something. And what I have noticed, especially here in the US, in Europe, it's a little bit more subtle because it's almost like a Christian underground. It's not as openly talked about as here, because here you can go to a grocery store and you can have a religious conversation with the next person. And people wouldn't
You
even
get saved
mind.
at Walmart.
Yeah, it's like so normal. Like, yeah, you went to church today. And I had it a lot of times when I said, oh my gosh, God is really working here, or the divine is moving. People are like, what does God have to do with all of that? Like, that's mostly the response from my friends from Europe. And like, well, we're all that. Like, God within, this is what we're creating from the divine within. This is the power that we have. And I think if I would be living 1500 years ago, I would be a witch. I probably would have burned. Maybe I did. I just don't want to remember it. Because especially my son, when I had him, I noticed the power that was coming from him. When I was pregnant with him, I always saw the color gold around him the entire time. Him and I just synced so well throughout this entire pregnancy. I told him the whole time, like, 7 pounds, you're done, dude. I'm not carrying you any further than that. And he, wouldn't you believe it, he wanted to come out a little earlier, and he said 7.05. That's what he managed. And I'm like, thank you. And then I said, let's do this fast, okay? And he agreed, and he pushed himself out within less than 2 hours, 5 pushes, we were done.
Wow.
He gave me a little bit of a rough time the first couple months, but that was more related to myself, because I felt a little resentment and anger toward him, because I just had created a rather successful business, and now he was in the way. I didn't understand that he was part of all of this, what I have been creating now. And he's just so magical. He just something that made it really clear how he thinks. And we had 4 miscarriages, 2 before him and then 2 after. And he was turning 3 the year that I had the last one. And when I had that miscarriage, we had to go to hospital. He had to go to the neighbor. I came back home and he looks at me, he's like, Mommy, I know what happened. It's okay. My sister will come back to us. Eventually, she will find another mommy, and then she will come back to us. She will just grow another mommy's belly, and that's okay. And for the last 3 years, he called her Annie, and her spirit is always around, except for the last couple months she left, she said she has to go somewhere. So who knows, maybe the adoption plan will show up and work out soon. we have been on it for quite a while, but if someone hears it and has any leads. But he's just so in tune. Like, he's always seen spirits, and I'm glad that I have this knowledge about a different spiritual understanding, because I could have shut him down very easily if I wouldn't have had that knowledge. Like, no, there are no bad people, and there's no demons, and there's no spirits. Okay, I don't really believe in demons, but in entities that are not of the light. That's what we say, because he was playing, and one day he just started acting out really weird, out of the ordinary. And I said to him, "Who are you playing with?" "Well, those are all my friends, but there's one that's not so nice." I'm like, "Okay, can you explain it to me? Can you tell me what he looks like?" "Yeah, it's like a little boy, and he just looks really scary." And he made a really scary face. I'm like, "Okay, that boy is not allowed to play with you." And so we prayed in the name of the Holy Spirit, knowing that God within, that we have the power, because Jesus told us. He lived that very perfectly as an example. And so we did. And he said, "Yeah, now he's gone." And so he understood his power. And that went on for a couple of years until I realized, dude, we can change the weather. We have a power to change the weather. And he looks at me, I'm like, "I know." I'm like, "Well, that's great that you know." So we have tested that many, many times. We lived on the west side and the south side, and now we live on the east side. And everywhere we live, the weather always splits. We were supposed to be hit by many tornadoes so far because we live in the Midwest. And they always went a few miles south or north of us. Other houses around us always were damaged. We never had any damage. And I realized the power really that comes from knowing the oneness with God, the God within, that we can communicate with nature in a way that is so powerful that you no longer see the tree as a tree, but as a brother or a sister. It's just such an incredible relationship. You start to hear the voices of the animals that come and give you messages. Like the hawk is playing a really big role for me. My dog talks to me constantly. I always say, you're not a dog, you're human. I can hear you. And my husband too, and my son too. But when you realize, especially when you have a storm come up, and how I always say it to people, the only way you can manifest is when you're within the storm and you notice and acknowledge the power that you have that gives you peace. So within the storm, like if you were to be in the middle of a hurricane, the eye of the hurricane is very quiet, right? You have to imagine yourself in the middle of the storm, but you have so much trust of the power that you have been given, that Jesus told us and showed us so much. You are capable of demanding the weather. And when you get to the place of complete trust, you move it and you thank Mother Earth for communicating and operating with you. And you will see those who honor the earth will honor back. Wow. We have so many medicinal herbs growing and coming in our grass because we don't fertilize or do anything chemically. And every time my husband goes out, I'm like, "I didn't plant that. Where's this coming from?" And then he's like, "Okay, but this is this plant and this plant," because he's a master herbalist, so he knows about plants, and they're usually related to me. Something that I need. It's really interesting because I'm the one who's out there, and he is more like, if he could just stay on his couch, he would be perfectly fine. I can do that for so long, and then I have to be out there. I know I'm driven to that. But it's just an example that when I noticed that power, I knew that the way I grew up within the Christian church was not true. Mm-hmm. I wasn't separated. And maybe that would explain, because people always said, "You need to read your Bible, you need to read your Bible." I have a few, but to be honest, I never really read it. There was nothing that urged me to read it. I said to one person, I said, sometimes I feel like I did read it or I lived it. I don't know. Maybe part of my past life was part of that. I don't know. But there's just so much that I realized when I read something in English and read something in German, it could have a total different meaning to me. It just shows up differently. And as I started to question that, why? Because it shouldn't. It should have the same meaning, right? It's just a different language. And I noticed the way we interpret different things, different terms, just really depends on our existence, where we're at in that moment, what we can grasp. Mm-hmm. And even if you receive a divine message, it is always within that time where you're at, what you're
Yep.
capable of fathoming,
Yeah.
like what you can grasp in that moment.
Yeah.
And depending where you're at within your level of awareness, that's what you're capable of seeing within that message. And I realized this is how we need to read the Bible as well. It's not, some people say that's my authority, and I say I cannot see a book as an authority. For me,
Yeah.
it's a guidance. There's a lot of truth because
Yeah.
it has been experienced with other people, and especially Jesus. I mean, I will never dismiss his role in all of that, because he
Right.
was such a perfect example of living out that. And when we say
Yeah.
becoming more like Christ,
Yeah.
it is exactly that, understanding oneness. He never judged. He never,
Yeah.
sometimes I meditate and I feel like I have those conversations with Jesus, and he said, most of the things that they tell you, I never did. I'm like, well, that's great. Good to know. Can I just...
I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. I love your
yeah.
spirituality. I love how you express your spirituality. And I can speak for me. Nothing you said troubled me at all. Nothing.
Right.
I mean, I want to go back and talk about some of that past life reincarnation stuff. I mean, that is absolutely fascinating to me. We don't know what happens after this life, right?
No.
And we've got our speculations. And, if you grew up like I did, you knew heaven, you're going to heaven, you're going to hell. That's it.
Yes.
And, as I grew out of that limiting, extremely limited way of thinking, my mind started to expand into what's possible. I mean, we give God credit for creating this whole universe, dimensions, galaxies that we haven't even discovered yet. Yeah. But yet we put our eternal existence into a little place called heaven, and that's it. And to me, that makes no sense. Mm-hmm. And so I'm fascinated now with what happens. And I am intrigued by the possibility of getting back on the train or getting back on the roller coaster and saying, hey, let's do this again. Let's go back down there and do it again.
I actually had a conversation with my friend, and we said, no, I think we better make this work now. We don't want to come back to this. I don't want to have to do this all over again. I think I'm at a point now where I start to really understand where the past lives seem to be adding up from what I have learned. Mm-hmm. I had one healer, she's like, yeah, you had a lot of past lives, but they all ended, or a lot of them ended very shortly. Like you had very short lives. A lot of them were related to challenges as a child, early death, or I died during childbirth. So I think that has a lot to do with my infertility. I carried that trauma, that generational trauma with me. And there's something that needs to be healed for me to really, I think it's just a little part of that keeps me from fully understanding the oneness. I think there's some guilt behind that and some shame, right? And shame and guilt was what separated us in the first place. Yeah. I even see the story of Adam and Eve as a metaphor between our ego and our soul, where we knew we could know everything God knows because we are one with God, and then our ego says, no, we're not doing that. Like, we have to create some power conflict here.
We've got to help it out a little bit.
That's right. And so it's very fascinating when I look at past lives. And then I asked him, like, so does it mean I'm going to end up here short too? And she's like, no, I don't think so. It seems to me that this is actually going to be quite a long lifetime for you, because you're adding everything up that you have learned over all those years or all those lifetimes. And you really stepping into that purpose. And that's why you have always felt that you had to come here to finish something. I had to break up with the old. For me, it was important to really leave the old behind so that I could step into the work that I do now. I do not think that I would have gotten that far if I would have stayed in Germany.
There's a lot of people. I'm sorry, Lynn, I just want to say one more thing. I'm sorry. There's a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but over the past 6 months, I've discovered, or things have been sent to me, that people who believe that before we came here, we knew all things, but through the birth channel, we forgot. And the journey was about, or is about, remembering all these things. And then I heard something recently that I thought was really fascinating, kind of in line with that. They said, we actually wrote our contract of what our life would be when we got here. We wrote it all out. We made a contract. And, from every single detail, our sex, our gender, who our parents would be, where we would be born, even the details of how we would die. And the lecturer was saying, someone, I guess she picked up a vibe from the audience, and she said, even a train wreck, we made a contract for that because we want to know what that was like to die in a train wreck. And hearing you talk about some of these different things, how they're affecting your life today, I think that's all relevant. I think it's a part of it that we didn't understand, and perhaps we weren't willing to understand because we saw everything so one-dimensional.
Well, I think something that we have to remember is that we are operating within a collective. So even if we have made a contract, we cannot foresee the future because the future can change at any time. So even if we have chosen, if our soul has chosen a certain life, it doesn't mean that it will end up being exactly that, what we may have been able to see or why we chose it. Because again, the collective shifts also the individual energy and the individual, like if we were to strip everything of physical matter, we would all just be energetic shapes depending on the vibration where we're at, right? And I would say in all kind of different colors, and that makes it so beautiful. And yet we're our own little entity through the bioelectromagnetic field. Like we could interact like this, but at the same time we're like molecules that are operating next to each other, right? You can never kill energy, but at the same time, someone shifts their energy over here and you were in this path and they collide with you and like, oh, wait, okay, now it seems to go a little different than what I thought it would. So there is definitely a collective influence within how our life is unfolding within 3D. And I know a lot of people always say you can change everything with your mind, but forget the power of the collective as well. You can do your part, and really all we have to ever focus on, and our entire calling is all based on unconditional love, just like Jesus did, just like what and who God is. I don't believe God is a person somewhere. It's a frequency of unconditional love. There is no judgment. If we declare that God is love, then you can say God judges. That just doesn't fit together. Something that is and then people say, well, they discipline. That's different. No, if you discipline, there is a condition behind that. But if God is unconditional love, then that doesn't make sense. Like, why would we do that?
Right. And unconditional
God doesn't
love
operate from ego. Right.
Right. Right.
There's no ego with God. That's why we separated ourselves from God. Yeah. And if we can understand that our entire calling and purpose is only always to reflect and keep love at the center of things, and then see, okay, everything that you do, everything that you say, you compare that to, is that in alignment with love? Is this what I'm supposed to do? And you can only do your part because you never can quite predict what other people would do. In terms of that, yet we know if we come from this place, we can definitely influence people for the better as well as for the worse, depending on where we're at with our own conscious and subconscious mind.
Well, I was just making sure Pastor Kyle, Bishop Kyle will allow me to. Y'all notice.
I'm sorry, man. I'm so sorry.
You haven't said anything in 45 minutes.
I am absolutely fascinated by this talk. I'm so sorry for taking most of the questions and time there, but I am fascinated by this.
All our viewers, y'all notice he has the microphone now and the headphones, and so I guess from now on,
it's psychological. It's all psychological now. I'm gonna send you one. I'm sending you one next week.
You make sure it's balanced.
It's got to balance out, exactly. We're gonna send you one.
I mean, I'm just sitting here. I'm a nobody now. No, I'm just playing. But one thing that I do, and this I really have to hear your perspective, because this is my heart and my passion. Something you said at the beginning,
Mm.
And you were saying that you were going to talk a little bit about it. Please, the connection between religion, I think you said the connection between religion and oppression, or something along those
Yes.
lines. Can you please share? Because I really want
Yeah.
to hear
Yes.
your thoughts about that.
I mean, we're looking at history, we can go back till the very beginning, literally, of mankind. But I don't want to go all the way back because honestly, I don't need to talk about dinosaurs. But if you look at it, every culture, every race, well, it's really just about culture. It wasn't even about race or the skin color in particular. But if you look at it, everyone who had a very deep spiritual understanding, you look at indigenous people, you've seen that with Standing Rock. They didn't show up with weapons, they showed up with prayer and dances, and they were able to use vibration as their power. And you know how they all responded. They have to come in full suit and weapons because subconsciously there's just such a fear about spiritually powerful people. And you've seen it with witches back then, especially females. The female power of intuition was always feared. That's a spiritual gift. Especially when it comes to witches, they had this understanding of oneness. They knew how to use and communicate with nature, how to heal. There was just some knowledge, some deep understanding of that divine within, and it was feared mostly by white men. I don't know what it's about white men, but they apparently experienced that power hunger very early on, especially when they created or started to create this a system of kings and queens. And it, I mean, have you ever really seen a black king or queen in England? I haven't.
Not in
So
England.
well, the one right
Definitely
now
not in
doesn't want to
England.
die, so she's been there for ages.
I mean, they're trying to integrate with a little color now, but you know, they're way down the secession line. So
Right. But if you look at it, also African tribes, they are very spiritually connected. Very early on, it was demonized, everything they did. Even if you talk about voodoo, you can use anything for good and for bad, right? Everything they've done, the way they experienced connection, the way they operated with each other was demonized very early on. They, for one, look different than us. And there is some spiritual power behind that subconsciously, especially people in power, fear, because they only rely their power on material things, where people who understand the spiritual power within them don't rely on material things at all. For me, I'm a huge minimalist. I don't need a big house. I don't need a fancy car. For me, it doesn't give me anything. And my son is the same way. He gives his toys away like it's nothing. Like, yeah, I don't care. You can have that. I don't mind. And I really learned that from him, that detachment to material things. He's just awesome at that. And obviously we want to encourage that as well. But spiritual people are less dependent and detached to material things. I think that's why we consider African tribes as poor, because they don't have the luxuries. But what if that is all they want and all they need, and they're perfectly okay with that? But when it comes to hunger, we've done that on purpose to control them. They had enough food for many, many years. They were able to sustain themselves for many years until the white people came back and said, no, you freak us out. Like, the way you live doesn't work. And so that must be something demonic, because again, very early on, church understood how to use emotions for manipulation to make you believe and do certain things that then became an idea. Then the idea became a construct. And as soon as 2 or 3 or more people agreed to that construct, it became the truth. And that's how most of the Bible has been interpreted, especially when you look at the King James Version. He had to turn Jesus white, right? Because he couldn't serve someone who was not his color, his skin color.
Right.
It just didn't fit his doctrine. It didn't fit his power level of patriarchy and how he saw himself fitting in. There was a fear of, if I allow someone else who is not like me to interfere in how I relate to life, then I'm losing all of that, because they're so attached to their castles, to their power, to their armies, and we see that again today. And then again, the white people came to America, then they were afraid of the indigenous people.
Yeah.
The Mayans were wiped out altogether in South America. They all, if you look at it, all of those tribes had such an incredible oneness with nature. There
Yeah.
was a give and take that I so honor about them. My husband is part Cherokee, and I think it kind of comes, it's in his veins as well, how he connects with nature. When he touches something, it just flourishes. You should see our wildflower garden and our herb garden and vegetables. We don't even have an acre, but that's all out there. We have all the animals. We're actually a certified wildlife sanctuary now, because we have
Wow.
everything in our backyard. Nobody else does, because they all spray. But it's that oneness, it's the complete understanding. I mean, I am so impressed when I watch indigenous tribes. They
Yeah.
always wanted to live in peace. They allowed people to come, but then we got so scared, like the people, the settlers were so scared of their power. What they
Yeah.
do can't
Call
be
them
right.
savages. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
suddenly you bring other people along with you, and you make them believe they are bad. So of course we have to fight them.
Yeah.
And most of the time they didn't even fight back,
Yeah.
because they believed that if I fight you, I actually fight me. You are my brother as much as this is my blood brother. And it's just incredible how they can, there's just so much power that is so feared, and the spiritual side of it is so feared. Why do you think government is trying to shut down holistic communities?
Yeah.
Everything holistic, everything related to holistic medicine, even if it's
Yeah.
Chinese medicine. I mean, that's why China, I think, is under communism, because there was so much power within the Hmong community, that so many
Yeah.
people were just so centered. The meditation is, I mean, it's all coming from Chinese traditions, right?
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating to me how, if we don't take a look at where we're at spiritually within ourselves, and how we within our religion created us versus them. And we talk about that in the documentary, where especially a lot of Christians feel the sense of superiority. We want to save you.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't need to be saved by you. I don't care how you think I believe, and if that's in alignment with what you believe, you don't need to save me. That's a superiority hero kind of thinking. I want to be your hero, so you're safe. Because something that became very clear to me when my grandfather died last year, he was in really bad physical shape, and we were wondering how long he will still be able to hold on to that. And he was in his late 80s, so he had a good life. But my family members told me that he was afraid to die. He didn't want to die. And I said, I'm not surprised, because within the church, you will always wonder, have you done enough? Have you sacrificed enough? Have you saved enough people that you deserve to go to heaven? What happens if you haven't, and you were just comparing that to human standards, and God actually says, no, that wasn't enough? Do I end up in hell? And what I did, and I can't talk with my family about that because they probably wouldn't understand. But that same night, I tuned in and I asked the divine to connect me energetically with my grandfather. And I told him, Grandpa, trust me, life is not as you have been taught it is after you die. You are okay. You will be in peace.
Wow.
This was hell. This
Wow.
was hell. You will not end up in hell. And the next morning, I got a text from my brother and said, hey, Grandpa just died. I'm like, I know. I talked to him.
Wow. Wow.
And it's just, that's where the spiritual side comes in, where we have become so afraid of that basic understanding of oneness. I mean, that's why they're trying, that there is systematic division. You see it now too, where people are being called to I just posted about that yesterday, which is really absolutely ridiculous. To be honest, we don't need a government who creates a police state or martial law. We do that ourselves very well.
Yeah.
We call the police on our neighbors. And that is within the Black community as well, especially people who feel like, oh, I need to fear them. They don't act like we do. We need to call the police. We're in danger. If you don't wear a mask, there's now outlets that call for defining people who are not a part of the regulations as your enemies. That is dangerous. That is very dangerous talking.
Yeah.
And that creates a very hostile environment too, where you don't even want to talk about anything anymore. You don't want to even be with people because you're afraid, what will they do to me? Oh, government already knows how to use you against someone else. They've made sure of that. And there's a systematic division, and you see it with any kind of group, with any kind of tribe that is experienced as powerful spiritually. You will see some sanctions and regulations against them. There's a reason why they're trying to take all the land from the indigenous people, to make them even weaker. And there's no way that they will ever give up, because their spirits will always be, this was indigenous land that we're on here, our house. And there's a very strong pull. And I love our little place because it feels so separate from the entire neighborhood. Because it's just like our little sanctuary. We don't even like to have people over that much because it's our sanctuary. There's such a clarity within those walls, and we all agree on that. Like, we're all on the same page in this house, my husband and my son as well. And yeah, I think people who are spiritually connected on such a deep level are the ones who are feared the most, because it speaks to our soul. And something that speaks to our soul endangers what we have connected and attached to from an ego perspective. And that's all the material things and everything that we have worked so hard for. We had to struggle for something. We can't just give it up just because our soul is calling.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. Wow.
I could talk about that for hours.
Yeah. I know I can speak for me and probably for Lynn and probably for everyone that tuned in with us tonight. You are so in tune spiritually what's going on inside of you, but also what's going on around you. And, you talk so much about people who have come to a certain spiritual level. And that's what I love about the Jesus story. When you take away, I need a savior. When you take away, I need somebody to wash me and cleanse me. When you take away all those churchy things we were taught about Jesus, and you can see Jesus in the essence of who he really was and what he was really doing, showing humanity, this is what you're capable of. This is what you can do. This is what love looks like, feels like, talks like, acts like, and I think that's what I'm really starting to resonate with now with the Jesus story. Even when I thought that I needed a savior and Jesus was that savior, I never felt saved. I always felt in danger, like you're talking about your grandfather, of perhaps there's just not enough getting done here, and God's going to run out of patience with me, and he's going to smite me with his vengeance. But once I moved past all of that needing to be saved and all of that anger, rage that I thought God was about, and connected with God's love on such a level, then Jesus became as clear to me as Jesus should be to everyone. This powerful, wonderful, beautiful example of this crazy love that not only speaks to humanity, but speaks to everything around him.
You start to feel such a deep love for who Jesus was that you automatically become like him. And I think that's really the secret that we need to talk about more. When you strip him of all the labels and what he was supposed to, he never had to sacrifice anything. He never sacrificed his life the way we are being told in church, because that would mean that the more we sacrifice about our life, the more Christian we are, the more we become like Jesus. And that is never, if we are one with God, if God is within, then there is no suffering. And I think that is what Jesus was really beautifully embodying, that the physical doesn't matter, that you can do whatever you want to the physical. It is the spiritual, the soul that can never die, that doesn't die. And it's funny, how, I don't know if the Bible talks about it or just church talks about it, where anyone could be Jesus, like treat everyone like they could be Jesus. Well, seriously, they could.
Right.
Maybe that soul reincarnated in that person. Who knows, It's just something that we need to become aware that we're often seeing ourselves in the other person. And when you acknowledge that, when you can just see people with the eyes of, I can honor the divine in you as I honor the divine in me, there's so much love that I cannot even describe it. And I'm not saying I'm perfect with that. There's still a lot that needs to be, that I go through. And
Yeah, me
I
too.
do have a bit of a temper, it just happens. It's not all rosy
Right.
and sunshine and great. There does come struggle with it, but that's
Yeah.
self-inflicted. And I just have to acknowledge that I'm putting myself through this because, well, for some reason I didn't learn that lesson earlier. Maybe I was just too stubborn. And trust me, my coaches would probably agree with me on that. It always takes a little longer with me.
Well, look, can you do us a favor? I don't know what time it is, but can you, number one, tell us where you at in the documentary? When should we expect it? Anything like that? And also, how can people, if somebody wants to send a donation, somebody want to help you out, if somebody like me is, I go and kind of see where you at, read the post to let us know anything you want to share about the documentary.
Certainly. We have a website. It's called thepowerofconnection.net. There is a little synopsis of the documentary. There's also the trailer. We do have the trailer, which I love, love, love. KJ did an amazing job with that. And there are also links to the Indiegogo fundraiser. I had to create a new one because I missed the deadline to extend the old one. Smart of me. But there is a link to the Indiegogo fundraiser, as well as the email list to sign up, where I routinely send out information where we're at, but mostly on social media, especially Instagram. That's where I share a lot of the pictures, like the little snippet of the animation. I actually post that on Facebook too. So right now we're in the middle of really creating. I have an absolute detailed script with everything from files to this is how it's supposed to go. Like, I'm very detail oriented, and it just all came to me in such an intuitive way that everyone pretty much knows what they're supposed to do. We're almost done with most of the illustrations. I think we're missing 3 or 4. I have a few people. It's actually interesting. I have one guy from Kenya. He's incredible. And Junior has an incredible skill for art. So he works on that. And then there's some guy one is from Japan, and the animator is from Taiwan. She's a grad student here at Purdue. So we're very international with this
Love
whole
that.
thing, which I
Love that.
love, because it
Yeah.
just gives it all the energy to the whole project. So we're really right in the middle. And the thing is, I haven't really been able to pay many of the people that work on it. They all volunteered graciously. They said, this is really something that I can stand behind. I want to be part of that. And so they committed to it, which I'm super grateful for. But I also noticed that I don't pay their rent. So I can't expect them to work on that every day. Hey, we need to get this done. And so we do need to raise at least some money, because there's legal costs from all the rights that need to be considered and all the fun stuff, not so fun stuff. We have a lawyer, but of course he needs to get paid as well. And if I can at least pay something for the editor, then we can get it done fast. The goal was June. With the whole COVID thing, we're behind in filming. So I think it probably will be closer to July, August. We were hoping to submit it to a bunch of film festivals. We were contacted by some of them already saying, hey, we love your project. We would love you to submit it. We want to look at it. But I have nothing to show yet that would, where I can say, okay, here, look at that. Even like a raw version of it for them to look at. We have different files. You can look at them if you want, but it doesn't really tell much about the story. And so we do need to get that done. And of course, money does play a role. And everyone is committed, trust me. I mean, people are like, I'm doing this because I stand behind your message, and this is important, especially now. But the more we can raise, the faster we can get it done. And right now, this is such an important message within the entire awakening that we're seeing, people really opening their eyes to what's happening, to a lot of the corruption, how people are being used, how we are being used for a different purpose that is not aligned with unconditional love, that is aligned with ego, that egoic understanding of who we are or who we are supposed to be. So this will be very important, especially for younger people. The goal is to eventually take it on the road to universities and colleges and high schools, to have a screening and then really open up the conversation with them. So an hour and a half of the documentary and then another hour to really have the deep conversations and asking the questions and saying, hey, okay, so what can we do as an individual? What have you noticed about your biases and prejudice? And what have you bought into that actually doesn't resonate with you on a deep level? Just really those honest conversations, just like we have here now. But I really want to focus especially at younger people. That's the target audience for it. Yet we all know that there are probably a lot of other people that will resonate with it, who are just in that mindset of receiving that message.
Well, I must be one of those younger people because it resonates with me. I mean, it's moving all up and down the side of me. So
yes. Yeah, it's fascinating to me who is responding to it. Like so far, we have this Facebook fundraiser as well. It hasn't been as great because, well, with the situation, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people lost their jobs. And there were people that say, hey, I really want to contribute. I just published a book. I want to give you 10 cents of each book that I sell. Of course, all of that was canceled, the book tour and all of that. So there are a lot of people that want to help. And a lot of times it's people that I don't even know. Like I was so touched when Lynn contributed, and I was like, it's people who hardly know me, who just believe in the message itself. And it just touches me so deeply, because I don't see quite that response from a lot of closer friends. I have a lot of really amazing friends that are just on me with it and always ask and contribute as well. I'm not saying that I love them dearly, but I just really see the generosity. I had someone, she is very much into refugee work, and over $100 right just there. And I knew she just didn't have that like that.
Wow.
But her heart told her that this is what she wants to do. And I almost cried. Like every time I see someone else, like, I have no idea who you guys are, but thank you so much. Like, it's just incredible how strangers believe in your work to the extent of saying, I want to share some of what I have with you so that you can do this work.
Yeah. Isabel, will you please, I tagged you in this video. So once we get off, you'll be able to see it and yourself tagged in it. Will you please come back into the comment section and add these links in there, the fundraiser links, the website links,
certainly, I can do
all that good stuff. So, and if I was in church, I feel the spirit of prophecy about to come over me.
Go ahead.
And I would tell you, God said you're going to meet everything you need. God said you're going to, but I stopped doing that a while ago because I was just too inaccurate. So I don't do any of that. But but I can tell you what I feel. I feel that, everything that you need will always arrive whenever you really need it. That I do feel. And,
it's been like that the last 6 months, every time.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say this as well. If you need anybody to actually be in the documentary, somebody that I don't know, I guess it's not called acting, but somebody that, I'll do it for free. Maybe a meal, all I need is a meal. All you gotta do is feed me. I'll eat just about anywhere for free.
I'll make you some German food. How does that sound?
Now, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool.
We actually have most of the individual filming done. We just had to shift a couple of things because we still can't film that, and theaters are still closed until June, July. Who knows? Most of them go bankrupt, so we can't do certain scenes anymore. So we had to be a little bit more creative. So we asked for the pictures and Some people did voiceover. So we're putting that together in a different way. We do need more pictures. We want to do a mosaic that turns into a picture of the earth. So that means us as a collective connected with all that is. And so we do need about 30 more pictures, random pictures, like your favorite pictures of you. Don't have to stage anything in particular, even if it's a picture with friends, just so that we have this experience of people coming together. So we do need some more pictures of people. If someone is interested, they can send it to me through Facebook, and then I send the video release form that people have to sign for legal reasons, or through my email, which is isabel@faithdrivensuccess.com.
Hey, Kyle, I already sent my picture, buddy. At least I'm gonna be in the
Yes, you did.
I'm gonna be in there somewhere.
Yes, you will. And in the credit roll as well. Everyone who has somehow contributed in any way will be in the credit roll. So you will find your name there too.
Awesome.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Well, we're a little bit over our time, which of these last few sessions we've had on the Graceline, our time doesn't seem to really matter. People are home, so they're looking for things anyway. So we've had the kind of grace to just extend our times a little bit.
Better than watching TV. Don't watch it. It's just programming anyways.
and this is such good information. I mean, I was mesmerized and captivated and intrigued, and you captured me from the very beginning. And that's not very often that happens to me throughout a whole hour and 20 minutes worth of talking, but I was fully intrigued, and you captured me right from the beginning. So much of the
thank you,
the language of your wording and the way you explain things, and I love how you kept everything centered around love. That's Lynn and I's heart, that everything we do, we center it around love. And that's you did that so very well for us tonight. And this was not scripted. This was not scripted at all.
Oh no, I never
flow.
Script anything.
Yeah.
I try to script my speeches and then they always end up different on stage. It's like,
me too.
Oh
me
well.
Too. But we really thank you for coming in and spending this time with us. And we would love to have you come back, especially as things start to progress, and you can make some more announcements here on the Graceline about where the project is, or you just come and talk, just be you, just do what you did tonight. We're good with that too.
Just do my thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And this has really been, it really has. It's been a blessing. And I just want you to know we are with you throughout your project. We are excited to see the final result, but just keep being you. And that's why I know it's going to happen, because of the person that we see, that we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
And we know that you're going to make it happen. So we applaud you. We are looking forward to the fruit of the documentary as well, because it's needed. The power of connection. I say this more than ever, we need to know that we are all together. I like to say we're all pieces of the same puzzle, but we have not been together. But as soon as we start connecting, we start to see the picture that has always been intended from the very beginning. So much love to you, for real, and just thank you. And we do want you to come back and just give us some updates. And like Kyle said, just talk. We just love to hear you talk.
Yeah. Well, thank you. With the German accent. I don't have much, but I do have a little. Thank you so much, guys. I mean, this was incredible. And if you would have continued this, I would have started crying. So this really is touching me deep, just knowing the support. And I can truly feel the love that is not just coming from you, but also from the people that are connected to you. And it's just such an incredible feeling of community. It's hard to describe. It's just, you can't describe it. You have to feel it. And that's incredible. So thank you guys so much for allowing me to be on tonight and giving me the platform to share more of that. That is truly a privilege. And I don't take that for granted. So thank you so much.
And I think outside of the documentary, which is fabulous all by itself, I think people had a chance to hear you and hear your heart. And I think you resonated not only with Lynn and I, but with so many of the people that tune into Graceline. Because this is where we were trending. And Lynn, remember, I was just saying to you maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago that we need to really, I just felt like we really needed to shift Graceline a little bit to really talk about some of these kind of matters. And I mean, tonight was just, I think, a perfect segue for us to kind of get into that flow. So thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody have a great night. Hopefully next week, please hold Kyle Butler to his word. I want a microphone and I want the headphones. So please tell him to have my microphone
ready to go. Do you guys live far apart?
Yeah.
So you couldn't just jump over and just use his phone, his microphone.
No, I want my own.
Where do you guys live? I don't even know.
I'm in North Carolina.
I'm in New Jersey.
Oh, so, we want to move to North Carolina. We want to move to Asheville, North Carolina. That's our thing. We were supposed to be there last week, and then we had to cancel.
Oh.
Well, Asheville is it's on the other side of the state, about 6 to 7 hours from it. Yeah.
Yeah, we love the mountains.
Yeah, I think it's a little ways, but come on, come on. But again, everybody, make sure send a comment to Kyle Butler. You heard him say he was gonna get my own microphone and earphones, because I guess y'all saw he was kind of as they say, smelling himself.
I was feeling it today, man. I was feeling it. I mean,
it makes a difference. It
really does. It really does. I mean, I feel like this whole new vibe going on tonight. I got the headphones on. I don't hear any background noise. I only hear my voice, except for when someone else is talking. So this is like, wow.
Yeah. Well,
just keep in mind that Amazon has a backlog on all the unnecessary stuff. Shipping. Yeah.
So that might be considered business, actually, working from home. So that could actually be considered as part of,
Okay, we'll
because I needed a new computer mouse, and that was here within a day. So I think that's considered as work from home necessity.
Okay. That's a work from home necessity. So I want my stuff by next week, man.
I love it.
Much love to everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We love you guys. We'll be back next Monday. Isabel, thank you again so very much. And everyone, come back to the comments, get Isabel's information, and please support this project if you feel led. Thank you, guys. We love you.
Thank you.